Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Logos Project. This is your host, Dom, and in today's video, part 3, I'm going to be rebutting more comments and taking a Q&A at the end. I'm not going to say I'm never going to do this again, but for now, this is going to be the last video doing this, and I have been talking to friends and acquaintances and been praying about it. I'm still not decided. I'm not sure what to do, but I am considering turning off comments on some of these videos, um, but I'm not sure yet. So we'll see. I'm praying about it, and yeah. So stay tuned. Hey, Sean, how you doing? Hey, Andy, let's go. All right, guys, we got a lot of ground to cover, and so let's just jump right into it. Here we go. Okay, one comment I got. I'm just going to read it. It goes, Archbishop Marcel Lefeve was one of the church fathers of Vatican II, and the truth is that he fulfilled his mission in the work that was assigned to him as a missionary. No amount of lies about him will convince those who know the church's teachings to follow what is not true traditional Catholicity. That is why his position was traditional. The church from 1960 onwards was involved in the destruction of the Mass due to the Ecumenical Council Vatican II. Pope Paul VI concluded with the formation of the Novus Ordo Mass that is not Catholic or Apostolic. So this one's pretty easy to rebut. Quite simply, it is not traditional to reject a council or a universally promulgated missal, and the church cannot defect in its promulgation in matters of a missal, liturgical promulgations, because that would be to say that the missal is a harm to the faith of the faithful, which goes against the constant tradition of the church, especially as found in the Council of Trent and Vatican I, among other places. And so this simply confirms that this person agrees with Bishop Lefeve and thinks that he was being traditional. But our contention here is that to be truly traditional is to take into account a Catholic ecclesiology and the truth that the church cannot defect in several different areas that are laid forth in the church's tradition. Okay, so that one is pretty, straightforward. I'm going to delete that. Okay. Moving on to the next one here. Okay, this one's good. It's going to provide some hopefully my response will provide some clarity in certain areas. Okay. This person says, test what these men say. Oh, by the way, I should probably specify I am referring to our video series on the Society of St. Pius X and traditionalism in general, if in case you're a newcomer and this is the first time watching our content. So continuing to rebut these comments, this person says, test what these men say. First error, that the SSPX were formed for the laity. The SSPX were formed in order to have well-formed priests. It is a priestly society. So the first problem with this is that it's basically a misunderstanding of what John has said, and I actually brought up this misunderstanding in a question that John answered and clarified. And so again, what we're seeing here is just people who are not watching all of our content and giving us a fair assessment of what we're actually saying. It is not a priestly society when it was erected. It was a pious union, and it is lay people being formed into the priesthood. So this is just a misunderstanding. Okay, continuing with that comment. This person says, research every statement they make. Please do. And I would love it if you guys come up with something that doesn't jive with what we're saying and that you reach out to us. We would love that. Please do. So, okay, next one is St. Athanasius was in exactly the same position as the Archbishop. Nearly the whole of Christendom had taken on the heresy of Arianism. He alone, St. Athanasius, stood up against it. Okay, and so this is just basically not true because the people that were basically adhering to Arianism were doing so contrary to the council that condemned Arianism. The Pope, when he excommunicated Athanasius, he did so under duress, under political pressure, and he subsequently recanted that. And St. Athanasius accepted the excommunication and just waited and did nothing about it. This is not at all the same thing as Archbishop Lefeve. So next point in this comment is today we have multiple heresies playing out at the same time. In order to be Catholic, you have to have the Catholic faith. So I'm going to get into some stuff from Luther because this reminds me a lot of Luther, who claimed that you have to have the whole Catholic faith, unlike the corrupt and heresy riddled visible institutional church. So more on that, I guess, is what I can say for now. Okay. This person continues, pull out your grandparents' old catechism and holy books, compare them to what is being preached today, right? Comparing, so Luther did this as well. It is not the same teaching. Buy yourselves Father Leonard Goffin's book, The Church's Year, written in 1880. The faith being taught today is not the same as it was in 1880. Why? The Pope and the bishops are apostolic, but their teachings are not. Again, this is exactly what Luther said, as we will read today, right? So they are new since Vatican II. Pope John Paul II called it the new evangelization. St. Paul teaches that if an angel should tell you anything different to what I tell you, then let him be anathema. About this, real quick, let me bring this up because I actually, so my, the most of the evangelization I do is involved in talking to Protestants. I have many Protestant friends, and when I talk about things with them, we engage in apologetics, charitable conversations, and sometimes it's a healthy rivalry that actually brings us closer. So the point I'm making is that I have heard many Protestant objections, and this one, unfortunately, is quoting from Galatians of a new gospel. If even an angel would bring it, they use this against the Catholic Church. They're saying the Church is teaching novelty that is not faithful to Scripture. So this is a typical and very common Protestant objection. So I will, the work of my channel is really to unfold and explicate the teachings of the Second Vatican Council and of the popes, Saint John Paul II, Pope Benedict XVI, Pope Francis. All of these things is what we're going to talk about. The person continues, the messages of Our Lady of Good Success, La Salette, and Fatima tell a very frightening story. Access the Fatima Center, Family Catholic News, Defeat Modernism, to learn the history of what has taken place at Vatican II. Yeah, do some digging. Although here he's saying do some digging in private revelation, which is fine, but he continues, many prophecies warn us that the clergy are leading many souls to hell. Pope John Paul II was involved with the prayer meeting at Assisi, as did Pope Benedict XVI in similar ways, as in Pope Francis with Pachamama and smudging ceremonies. They are marching us to paganism and idolatry and to hell. Again, these are exactly the words of Luther, right? And so, and we'll look at them shortly. But here we also see something that some of my viewers have brought up, which is a hyper focus on private revelation at the expense of, a traditional theological reading of the New Testament and the promises that Christ made to his church, as well as a traditional Catholic ecclesiology that sees the church as visible as well as the mystical body of Christ. So there's a lot there. Continuing. This person says, do not follow like sheep. It is time to put on your thinking caps. We need to think for ourselves and not just follow the status quo. Again, that's good. Like you should think for yourself. What I'm saying is that this is the kind of epistemic individualism that you find rampant in Protestantism. The Catholic understanding of epistemology is that because the faith is supra-rational, it can't be attained through some kind of individual deductive rationalistic, syllogistic way of moving forward and then discovering, aha, this is it, I got it, right? There's a marriage between faith and reason, and faith is first and foremost ecclesial, and reason is actually what well, not unaided reason, but reason is what helped me realize this ecclesial dimension of the faith. Now, this is individualistic, Protestantism in the sense of like it's an epistemic claim that ignores First Timothy 3:15, I think it is, that the church, the ecclesia, the assembly, right, the communion of believers. Without that communion, if you think on your own, apart from that communion, you won't be grounded on the bulwark and foundation of truth. Continuing, he mentions the miracle of the sun. I don't see. So here he basically here mentions that she made it clear to him. He's talking about. So a certain priest, Father Rafferty, interviewed Sister Lucia, and she made it clear to him that Our Lady wants us to pray the daily rosary and wear the brown scapular. This involves being consecrated to her Immaculate Heart. The two are inseparable. How come the majority of Catholics have never heard this before? Again, I say the rosary very often. It's one of my favorite devotionals, and I also wear a brown scapular. But the thing is, the church doesn't say you have to do these things. If you're, especially if you're, for example, right, if you're an Eastern Catholic, um, you have the Jesus prayer, you have different devotionals, different forms of piety, different miracles and apparitions. And so these are meant to aid, right, the devotion of the faithful. But here they're being described as, you must do them because Our Lady said that everyone has to do it this way. And that's just a misunderstanding of what Our Lady is saying. She's giving us a beautiful tool that is very helpful in our devotional life that I use because I'm a Latin Catholic, right? I'm a Roman Catholic, and I can talk for hours about the Rosary. I love the Rosary, but again, this is a fundamental misunderstanding. It's taking little T traditions, right, or little P practices, right, and weaponizing them against a proper understanding of capital T tradition and the capital P practice of liturgical worship as promulgated by the Church. So that's one thing among many. Moving forward, last section of this person's comment. As we can see, Pope Francis is desperately trying to snuff out the traditional Latin Mass. What exactly is so dangerous about this Mass? Pope Benedict XVI tried to tell us that it was a continuity of tradition, but yet Pope Francis flatly denied this. Pope Francis is correct. So now he's agreeing with Pope Francis. The new theology is not a continuity, it is new. That is why Pope Francis wants to snuff out the traditional Latin Mass. The theology of the traditional Latin Mass does not match the theology of the Novus Ordo Mass. Don't be deceived. So the reason why the Pope Francis came down on the traditional Latin Mass is, well, again, I hate that term. The reason why Pope Francis came down on the celebration of the Missal from 1962 is because it was being weaponized against the council and against the liturgical reforms and against the authority of the magisterium, right? And so that is in continuity with Pope Benedict's vision that both missals are good and beautiful expressions of the traditional Catholic faith, and they can mutually enrich each other. But the problem is, what is happening now is that one is being pitted against the other and is being weaponized. That's why he came down. Again, we can argue about the prudence and everything, but right now I see bigger fish to fry, and so I'm going to fry those fish. So okay, but then he goes on to say that the masses basically are different. So he vindicates Francis. He says Francis is correct, you know, uh, because he's now saying that it is a new theology in the sense where there's discontinuity, rupture, and the church has defected, basically. So that's just not going to do it. Um, Moving on, next comment. Oh man, I don't know if I want to cover all these. I really wanted to though. Oh, maybe we'll just make this a long stream. Okay, this one says Bishop Athanasius Snyder has some good things to say about the SSPX that are worth considering in this regard. Perhaps the guidance of an Orthodox holy bishop would be helpful as well. The current magisterium is divided. All the bishops and the Pope do not agree with each other, so we are left to figure out where the true magisterium lies. This, again, is a fundamental misunderstanding of basic traditional Catholic teaching. The magisterium is divided. I'm not sure what that means. Like, are you saying that there's a document promulgated by the magisterium where there's people who signed it at the bottom that said we disagree with this document? The magisterium, right, it has explicit and obvious and clear documents that it promulgates, and if you go against that, you are against the magisterium. So I'm not sure what's being said here. The magisterium is the communion of the bishops with the Pope, right? And anyone who steps out of that communion is divided from the magisterium. But because the magisterium is a communion, then to say it's divided is to misunderstand what that means. So it's a misunderstanding of basic Catholic theology. Um, Again, I'm not trying to be flippant here. Basic in the sense where it's at the basis of Catholic theology as it's been taught and handed down. Okay, with the Pope and bishops with bad fruits, or the few bishops that disagree with them and speak out against the heresies, sacrileges, and abuses being promulgated. If the magisterium that made that document was a bad magisterium, you can have a bad document. Again, this idea that we should not differentiate between the sins of persons and the promulgations of the magisterium is a Protestant argument that Luther makes ad nauseum. And what I would say is that a bad document from the magisterium, no, you can have maybe a document that requires, some amelioration and some, in the future, for example, by the magisterium itself. But the fact of the matter is the magisterium in its official capacity, it cannot lead people into sin and heresy. It has a divine protection from the Holy Spirit. Now, there's different theological notes. We've talked about this at length. I'm going to have Michael Lofton on to talk about the magisterium in more detail. Check out his content. He's got great stuff. Moving on. So I reply to this commentator, try to explain some of this stuff, and they conceded part of it. Said, okay, the magisterium is the pope and the bishops in union with him. Okay, but then they say that is so they're specifying what they mean by this. Those who are united and have good fruits. So they're adding good fruits here, right? And the problem with this is, and I'm going to read it straight, it's straight from scripture. Again, this is basic Catholic theology, and so she can I think it's a she, it might be a he, I'm not sure. And continues, those preserving tradition are passed on to them, not those rupturing with tradition. Again, there's an epistemic claim here that is the same that Luther made, which is an assumption that the magisterium in its official capacity can rupture from tradition, capital T. That's not Catholic ecclesiology, gentlemen. Um, in the current magisterium, we do not have union, so the Catholic faithful have to follow the true magisterium. See, the true magisterium. What's that? She mentioned Bishop Schneider. Now, I love Bishop Schneider. What I'm saying is that, certain heroes take the place of the magisterium. This is dangerous. That we've seen this before in the history of the church. Um, in my opinion, there's a schism in the church, in particular in the hierarchy. It just hasn't been officially declared. Well, who would declare it if the hierarchy has defected? And then you will know them by their fruits. Okay, I'm just going to read from Matthew chapter 23, verses 1 through 3. Quote, then Jesus said to the crowds and to his disciples, the scribes and the Pharisees sit on Moses' seat. Therefore, do whatever they teach you and follow it. But do not do as they do, for they do not practice what they teach. And then he goes on to describe them as hypocrites. That's been the Catholic teaching. I don't understand what's not clear here. There's oftentimes these talking points of we're in a time of crisis, things are confusing, but what that becomes is a slogan that justifies one's actions. Things are pretty clear to me so far in this area. Now, I will concede there are things that need clarification and there's ambiguous waters, but we have tools to navigate that. I don't like this argument of we're in a time of crisis and we're in confusing times. It seems to me that's basically an excuse for holding to whatever we like on an individual basis. It's a Protestant epistemology once again. So moving on. Quo primum rules. A worm gets into an apple and degrades it and eats away at it from inside and changes its structure and viability from perfect to corrupted. It's still an apple, but not as God has originally created it. Anyway, it will rot from the worm and fall to the ground and seemingly die and disappear. The soul of the apple, the seed will give its life and will sprout a renewed tree that will blossom. So this is, uh, well, I'm not fully sure what it means, but it's rhetoric, and but it's assuming a kind of like actual worm and rot. It's very flowery language. It reminds me a lot of Luther. We're going to be reading some of Luther. Luther, if you want to find a way to insult someone in a really poetic way, but that's also nasty, read Luther. I've had someone tell me, "I heard you recommended people read Luther." So if you're saying that I'm a heretic because I read heretics, then why are you watching my videos? It doesn't make any sense. Of course you should read Luther. I'm going to be reading Luther today. So anyway, um, okay, this next comment. Canon 13 of Session 7 of the Council of Trent, which carries an anathema, is infallible and irreformable. It states, if anyone says that the received and approved rites of the Catholic Church accustomed to be used in the administration of the sacraments may be despised or omitted by the ministers without sin at their pleasure, or may be changed by any pastor of the churches to other new ones, let them be anathema. Bro, that's exactly our point. That's what's happening. But this person is trying to say that the church doesn't have the right to do this. The pastors in name here, they're trying to lump in the pope with them. This was promulgated by the council so that people can't just willy-nilly do what they want. That's our point. This see Trent backs us up here. Anyway, thank you for the for the quote from Trent. Really helpful. Um, okay, moving on. There's no pope, but rather an anti-pope. The last true pope died in 58, Pope Pius XII. It's well known that his successor was a Mason. I probably shouldn't have read that one. It was short. Anyway, it was on my list, so there's that one. Um, I'm gonna reread these to make sure if I should read them. Yeah, this one talks about the infiltration being widespread. The prophecies of Our Lady of La Salette have come to fruition. Rome has lost the faith. So we've talked about that before, guys, right? The use of private revelation to undermine basic traditional Catholic theological claims. No go. we're not gonna do that. Okay, this one here, I found funny, and actually a friend sent me something, and I want to show it to you guys if I can share my screen, but just a second. So the commentator says SSPX has valid bishops, validly ordained priests, offers valid mass, validly absolves sins, and can validly administer the sacrament of matrimony. Is it not even it is not even coherent to claim that they are in schism. You do not understand basic Catholicism. Anyway, do you deny that Bonini was a Freemason? Are you a Freemason yourself? Okay, first of all, where have we denied the validity of the sacraments of the SSPX except for confession and marriages and in case confession in particular cases as well as marriage actually. When it comes to the other sacraments, we've never denied their validity. It's just not true. Um, but, uh, so we don't understand basic Catholicism. I'm not gonna comment on that. Do I deny that Bunini was a Freemason? There's no, concrete evidence that Bunini so someone asked me to repeat this, and I will. There's no concrete evidence that Bunini was a Freemason. That being said, he was definitely a shady guy. But the problem with this is twofold. In the history of the church, there's been shady people that were behind legislations many times. Right? So we have here a kind of Pelagian or maybe like an historian understanding of the church, right? Where we deny its the divine protection that it is granted. God can write straight with crooked lines. You see this with Caiaphas in the Gospel of John, right? Another point to bring up is that um, the idea that Bonini could have this massive influence on the whole of the Novus Ordo Missae is ridiculous. If you look at any kind of bureaucratic, you know, um, committee ever, right? I've read a couple people on the commission that themselves pushed for certain things, and some that were very good theologians, and they got some of their results and everything. But it was a bureaucratic business here, and so it's yeah, so I would combine those factors and just remember that we're not historians or Pelagians, so it's just not how ecclesiology works. I mean, if that's how it works, we've been screwed for centuries. Church is not here anymore, guys. Okay, so yeah, so I wanted to show the picture that someone sent me. So this person asked me if I was a Freemason. Let me just show you something. Okay, let's see if I can share my screen. Oh, let's see. Share. Share screen. It's not gonna work. Okay, let's try this. Uh, there we go. Okay, so I'm wearing the Lord of the Rings T-shirt here, the Doors of Durin, right, which is on your left here. It should be on your left, and on the right is a Masonic symbol. And there's it's not even that similar, right? But so if you put two and two together, this shows that apparently I am indeed a Freemason. So you got me. Dang it. Okay. Moving forward. We're actually covering good ground. This is good. Next comment. Considering a marriage occurs without the priest needing to be present, I think you are confused. It is not as simple as saying without a bishop, without a bishop's approval, the marriage is invalid. Especially after the year of mercy of Pope Francis, there is no cause for concern. If a particular bishop is not going to play ball because they don't agree with the Pope's command to grant marriages to SSPX, canon law provides for marriages via the parish priest when a month or more would pass without the normal ordinary or bishop approving. Yeah, this is basic misunderstanding of church law. Uh, when you're a Catholic, so the ministers of the sacrament is not the priest, right? It's the spouses. But the a Catholic marriage needs to be witnessed by a priest with jurisdiction, because the ecclesiastical law puts it forth that way. And now there are cases in which if a marriage is being refused, they can go somewhere else, but it has to be somewhere with jurisdiction, right? So again, just I don't think I'm the one confused here. Maybe I could, maybe there's more details I can learn, but it sounds like this comment is a basic confusion. So moving on. Okay. Um, this comment says the excommunication has not been renewed on the SSPX. I don't see them as schismatic, but like the Russian Orthodox outside Russia, preserving the old Catholic tradition for the faithful. Um, Schism is not merely a declaration of law. We've covered this extensively. There's the external forum, the internal forum. There's the moral aspect. There's the legal aspect, and certain acts, for example, consecrating bishops without the permission of the Holy See, are what we call latae sententiae excommunications, as opposed to ferende sententiae. John got into this in our other video, and so it's an automatic excommunication. What happened is that Pope Benedict lifted the excommunication so that the actual schism might heal, right? So the moral aspect of it. So no, I would say they're still in schism. Now, the priests and the bishops. Now, the faithful depends on if they know what they're doing when they're adhering to the position of the society. Um, okay, moving on. This comment says, at 30 minutes, you suggest the traditionalist is like Luther going off and doing his own thing. The odd thing about this is the fact that the traditionalist is doing what the church has always done. So that's exactly what Luther said, right? And then he specifies liturgically. No, the church's liturgy has changed throughout the centuries. There are truths of the faith that don't change. Absolutely. And those things that are false are what Luther did. Yeah, but that's the thing. What you're claiming is what Luther's claiming is that the church changed things that can't change. What I'm saying is that no, the church hasn't. It should be clear at this point that Vatican II prelates have abrogated tradition, not interpreted it. That's what Luther would have said, although he didn't have Vatican II, but that's the same stuff he said. Um, it should be clear at this. Oh, he already read that. The church has been infiltrated, and the Luthers of our day run the Vatican. And then he adds, "Ask Vigano." Sorry, this is funny. Anyway, again, I hope I'm not being disrespectful. Maybe I am. I'm trying to be careful, but you got to admit this is kind of ironic from based on what we've been presenting, right? Okay, so let me delete this. All right, a few more comments here. We're actually making good ground. 27 minutes. Good. Let's keep going. The whole point of modernist theology is to use loaded, ambiguous terms. Post-conciliar Catholic theology is a cesspool of ambiguity, mush, and heterodoxy, and should be avoided. De Lubac is but one example. That was a very generalized statement, kind of ambiguous. There's no specificity, no particular things brought up. So it's kind of ironic, really. I would agree there is theology out there that is like that. I also think there's theology that we had in the past that was problematic. It's just the world isn't that black and white, and the more you dig, the more especially if you look at precedents in history, the more things become clear as to what you should do as a Catholic. So I found this comment interesting because it goes back to what I was saying. This person, so I was complaining that they are operating from a kind of a presuppositionalist position, right? They have a kind of a bias, what's it called? A bias? Yeah, a bias. And so I called that out, and this person replied, "My preconceived system is the deposit of faith, and it never changes. And if you say that that is an ideology, then I plead guilty." Wow, that's exactly what Luther said. We're gonna read what Luther said. I got this big book here, right? What Luther says. That's what it's called. So we're gonna be reading some of that stuff. All right. Also, this person continues. Also, some things require ambiguity because they require further theological development. He's quoting me, right? So I'm thinking of like Trent with tradition, the concept of tradition, for example, and other places like the Assumption of the Blessed Virgin Mary. Uh, so he says this is spoken like a true modernist. People like, no, I'm not going to read that. I kind of already started reading it. So delete. Okay. Um, this comment goes, my guidepost is the deposit of faith, which never changes and is not private judgment. Your guidepost is whatever Pope Francis babbles in his latest airplane interview. No, that's definitely not my guidepost. Lord help me. But this is what Luther said again. So this is kind of redundant. I'm gonna skip this. Yeah, I've already said all this. Gonna skip all that, guys. Okay. One person commented on another video, the ordinary magisterium can go astray, and it happened with the Arian heresy. So I replied, the Arian crisis was one in which many bishops dissented to the teaching of an ecumenical council, which is very different from saying an ecumenical council can teach Arianism. A good analogy would be the many bishops in Germany who dissent from the magisterium stance on same-sex relationships. Now, it is possible that the ordinary magisterium can legislate imprudently and can even promote erroneous teachings which are later reversed. For example, the condemnations on using Aristotle in the 13th century, which was subsequently reversed and led to the exaltation of St. Thomas Aquinas. The SSPX's position, however, is not that this or that group of bishops have gone astray, but rather that the official acts of the extraordinary magisterium in an ecumenical council have gone astray. The difference between both positions being the difference between communion with the church and lack of communion with the church, which is grave matter. One comment says we must be Michael Versus disciples. Nope, no affiliation whatsoever. Okay. Hey, this is good. We're almost done with this list. I thought it was going to be too long. Okay, this comment says Protestant ecclesiology is professing the true faith only. Catholic ecclesiology is professing the true faith and the visible hierarchy. So I agree with this. I think what they're doing here is they're reiterating what I said, or what John or Andrew or someone else said. But then they reply to this. They say, "Prove to me that the visible hierarchy is professing the same true faith as all of the church did throughout 2,000 years." And then he gives examples such as modernism, naturalism, evolutionism, ecumenism. Again, this is basically he's saying, if it's true what you're saying, how to explain what he's saying? He's basically saying, yeah, I'm a Protestant because the church has, in fact, promoted things that are make us have to deny its visible authority in a certain sense because of these supposed heresies. I would say read the documents, and there's so much that goes into them, and they're beautiful documents. And I would say no, they do not. I was actually watching a video on a French YouTube channel that I just discovered. Really, really good stuff. And he kind of did a historical survey and showed how, in fact, the Second Vatican Council was the culminating result of the debate over modernism. It's the church's official response to modernism. And he showed how that works in a very interesting way that, I'll have to rewatch the video and maybe see if I can share it with you guys, like kind of translate the main parts of it. I got to be careful because of copyrights, but so that's something that's worth investigating. All right. Another comment here says, I'm confused on what salsa to believe. So on which one, which salsa, SSPX salsa, no sordo salsa, or ICK salsa? After reading Salza's reply to Salza on 1 Peter 5, his credibility is questionable. I had a lot of respect for him, especially from his older works videos. Okay, I replied to this and I said, look, respectfully, I don't understand this quote. I don't know who to believe, past Salza or present Salza. Is critical thinking not an option on the table in this dilemma, right? So what is Salza saying? How about that, right? So this idea that I can't trust this man because he changed his mind, it's an ad hominem. It's also a genetic fallacy, right? It's basically just bad logic, bad thinking. So, you look at someone's arguments, right? And then you say, okay, this is where he's wrong because I disagree for these reasons. You don't say, oh, that guy changed his mind, therefore he's not trustworthy. It's like an atheist could say something that's correct, right? You look at what he's saying, not the fact that he's an atheist. This is the genetic fallacy, right? But also, I just want to say, like, um, I personally, right, don't know which Lefeve to believe. The one at the council, right? The one of 74 or of 88? The one that wrote to Paul VI saying that, he accepted the council? He wrote to John Paul II saying he did accept the council? Or the one that wrote in 74 that he rejects the council? I'm not sure which one to believe, right? Which is the irony, the point I'm making here, right? And so, I'm not using that argument, right? Which is my point. To use that argument against John fails. Okay. Let's see, guys. I covered this. All right. Okay. This is telling, so I'm gonna have to share my screen again. This one goes, what do you make of Cardinal Edward Cassidy, president of the Pontifical Council for Christian Unity, saying in 1994 regarding the SSPX, quote, the situation of the members of this society is an internal matter of the Catholic Church, end quote. How can it be an internal matter of the Catholic Church if schism puts one outside of the Catholic Church, as Pope Pius XII said. Well, guess what? That comment was on the very video that answered that question almost verbatim. This is what I'm saying. If people are commenting and not watching what we're offering, it's not intellectually responsible. So I'm going to play the answer to that question. Let me know if you can't hear any of the comments. I mean the sound. Sorry, if you can't hear the sound. So here we go. I have a question for you, John, again. It says here, the head of the Pontifical Council for Promoting Christian Unity, Edward Cardinal Cassidy, issued a statement in 1994 saying, quote, "The status of the society is the internal matter of the Catholic Church, and it is not another church or community in the sense used in this directory. Therefore, the society is not in schism." What would you say to this, John?
Isn't that organ of the church completely modernist? Isn't Cassidy a modernist? Why would we care what they say, right? I mean, that's,
I don't know.
I'm being facetious here, right? They always use what is to their benefit. Look, I side with the magisterium with John Paul II. That's not an authoritative statement on schism, nor does it make the proper distinctions between whether they've been excommunicated in the internal form versus the external form. And if they're not excommunicated by virtue of a declared censure, are they at least excommunicated by virtue of separating from the church, by being legally part of this schismatic sect? It doesn't address any of those necessary distinctions to really address the question, right?
Yeah.
But we do have John Paul II's magisterial declaration, whereby he says those who formally adhere to the society incur the censure of excommunication for schism. Okay,
Yeah.
That's where it begins and ends for me as the declaration from the supreme authority.
Yeah, not only that, but it's interesting how the apologists for the SSPX continue to recycle these opinions that have been given, whether by authoritative bodies or not, that have. I mean, this was over 25 years ago that this opinion was given. There have been a lot of developments since then. So you can't just take a quote and say, "Oh, this applies," right? You have another 25 years of repeated acts of disobedience and withdrawal of submission. I mean, that it's compounding. I mean, at this point, since the society's founding and everything that began to take place a short 5 years after it was erected, this situation has just been getting more and more grave.
Yeah. Yeah, it's unfortunate. It's unfortunate because I keep getting the same kind of bullet points. Athanasius, supply jurisdiction, crisis, crazy times,
recycling the same ones over and over again.
It's like, watch our videos carefully, and we address these, okay? And they do not work. But okay, anyway. So another question for you, John. All right. Did you guys hear all that? I hope so. So okay. Continuing with my notes here. Okay, so answer that question. Boom. Wow, I'm so happy I'm covering all this. I didn't think I was going to get through it. Okay, so this person responds to what Andrew said about Lefeve identifying the SSPX as the true church and the conciliar church as the counterfeit church. The commentator says Lefeve is not claiming that everybody is in a state of schism except the SSPX, only those who introduce the reforms which are contrary to the tradition. The thing is here, guys, that it's the church that promulgated those sacraments, right? So the church isn't a schism. This is a syllogism, right? So let me reread it. Only those who introduce the reforms which are contrary to tradition are in schism. The church introduced those reforms, therefore the church is in schism. This is exactly what we're saying. Okay. Now the good part. Quote where you will find those texts in Luther. So it's a question. Can you offer quotes, please? Is what the person is saying. Thanks, Billercrat. Sound was good. Awesome. Okay, good. Yeah. So okay. So they're asking me to quote Luther. So here we go. We're gonna quote Luther. Okay. From Luther's response to Exordia Domine from Leo was it 10th? I think it was Leo the 10th. Yeah. Okay. Here's quotes from Luther. Open quote. For who before God would be happier than Luther if he were condemned from so great and high a source for such manifest truth? Again, that's like, maybe different synonyms are being used, but that's verbatim what Andrew was reading, right? Another quote here is, quote, I protest before God, our Lord Jesus, his sacred angels, and the whole world, that with my whole heart I dissent from the damnation of this bull, end quote. And here another quote from Luther. It says, quote, you then, Leo X, you cardinals, and the rest of you at Rome, I tell you to your faces, if this bull has come out in your name, then I will use the power which has been given me in baptism, whereby I become a son of God and co-heir with Christ, established upon the rock against which the gates of hell cannot prevail. I call upon you to renounce your diabolical blasphemy and audacious impiety, and if you will not, we shall all hold your seat as possessed and oppressed by Satan, the damned seat of Antichrist, in the name of Jesus Christ, whom you persecute. And a final quote from this passage of Luther's response. It says, quote, it is better that I should die 1,000 times than that I should retract one syllable of the condemned articles. Again, verbatim, maybe different synonyms, but verbatim from what Archbishop Lefeve said. And he continues, and as they excommunicated me for the sacrilege of heresy, so I excommunicate them in the name of the sacred truth of God. Christ will judge whose excommunication will stand. Amen. Luther said amen, not me. So, wow, guys, am I the only one seeing this here? And we're about to, read some more about Luther, So, okay. We've covered a lot. This is great. But now, let's see. Now let's get straight to Luther. Just a second. All right. Can you guys hear me good? All right, here we go. So, what Luther said. Quote, so very miserable does the Pope in these decretals corrupt and crucify Christ. That is the truth. I am terribly pained that the people of God should be deceived like this under the guise of laws in the Christian name. I've heard this before by many friends or acquaintances, that it's through our obedience that Satan prevails. Another quote here. And all this must go under the name and guise of Christ and God, so that no one believes it until Christ himself comes and illumines this darkness with the light of his advent. Right? The church is in darkness, and it's under the name of Christianity, but it's all heresy. It's all modernism. Okay, another quote here. The spirit of the Pope is the subtlest of them all. He acknowledges the coming of Christ, retains apostolic words and apostolic preachings, but the kernel he has removed, the truth that Christ came to save sinners. For form's sake, he has kept everything, but in reality, he has taken everything away. This calls for art and cunning to pollute everything while maintaining the best of appearances. Does that sound familiar? Moving on to this section here, Luther says, quote, they condemn and excommunicate us in the name of the church. We, however, stand our ground and say, the church of Christ is not doing this, but the bride of the miserable devil and the rabble of Antichrist. For the true church, which knows Christ, will certainly not place the ban on anyone for the sake of the word of her Lord. For she herself preaches and believes that word and very gladly hears it. So I'm going to go through a few more. If you guys want to put some questions in the chat, just make sure you put at the Logos Project, and I will address them. Luther says here, quote, here I ask, has this faith then become older and better than the faith Christ himself established and transmitted? May it in fairness be called the, quote, old traditional faith, unquote? After all, for more than 1,500 years, all of us date our era from the birth of our Lord Christ, not from the papacy at Rome. Okay, and this is where, it's marked up all over here. This is good stuff. Okay, so quote from Luther, that is why Christ cannot be the head of an evil community, although the people are subject to him as Lord. Just as his kingdom, Christendom, is not a bodily community or kingdom, yet all things are subject to him, whether they are spiritual or bodily, hellish or heavenly. Right? So the visible and the temporal Here he calls hellish and the spiritual heavenly. He's divorcing the temporal and the spiritual, right? There's a satanic church, an antichrist church that teaches heresy, and then the true church, right? And he even goes on to talk about Rome, like in a sense, he says, where is it? I have to find it. Oh man, he praises the See of Rome, but he, in the sense where because it's the See of Peter, um, I don't know. Anyway, it's here somewhere. Let me see. Maybe I can find it. No, I don't want to make you guys wait for no reason. Anyway. Okay, well, that's that. So that's Luther. All right, let's take some questions now. Scrolling back up. Okay. Sean asks, in the case of Athanasius, didn't even during his excommunication he commend his followers to listen to the Pope? I hate to disappoint you. I actually don't know, but I do know he accepted meekly and humbly the excommunication and did not go against it. I was reading somewhere else about Athanasius and the scholarship on it, but I don't remember exactly what he said to his followers. So sorry about that. Got a question here. Okay, I think one thing missing from those of us critical of doomsday radtradism is that we oftentimes don't present a clear eschatology. Your thoughts on postmillennialism? Yeah, there's a great book by Joseph Ratzinger called Eschatology that goes into depth on the church's. Well, it's not the church's official teaching. That he wrote this when he was was he a bishop? I think he wrote it in '88. Actually, that's interesting. But anyway, he wasn't a pope or anything. But he gets into the eschatology of the early church as well as a kind of historical survey of the doctrine when it comes to postmillennialism. Yeah, I mean, this idea that Christ will come down and reign for 1,000, is that what it is? 1,000 years, and then the eschaton will happen, where heaven and earth will be, renewed. So this idea, well, actually, just specify for me because I'm not quite sure. It's usually a Protestant belief, if I'm not mistaken. But no, I mean, we don't believe that there's going to be 1,000 years of reign of Christ before the new heavens and new earth. Why? Oh, wait, no. We got a question here. Okay. Do you think the Western Church would be better off with one form of their own right rather than different expressions of it, or can they actually enrich each other? It's a good question. I do think that the ideal is that we have one form of the Roman Rite. I think that they did enrich each other during the pontificate of Benedict. I think they could do so more, but because of the situation we're in, we have bigger fish to fry, unfortunately, because I love liturgy. So this is kind of, it makes me sad and angry. But so I don't know if that helps, but that's what I got. What else do we have? We got another question here. I'm curious about your thoughts on the accusations that the church today is too nice and too focused on forgiveness, mercy, etc. If that's true, is that such a bad thing? Yeah, it's an interesting question. The medicine of mercy that Pope John the 23rd talked about. Um, in many cases, it is good. I do think there's a kind of lack of discipline, like of kind of cracking down. Although we did see Pope Francis crack down, it's just, is it consistent? I don't know. What I would say is this, right? Before the council, so before I even say that, right? Little t traditions and practices are in place to lead you and point to, right, capital T tradition, to Jesus himself, right, to the faith, to the eschatological, the heavenly, right. So temporal things point you. It's this whole understanding of participation. It's partly comes from Neoplatonism, but Christianized Neoplatonism. Pseudo-Dionysius talks about this a lot. It's actually Pseudo-Dionysius is quoted in Unam Sanctam by Boniface VIII. The point being is that the little t tradition stuff, is meant to lead you and to help you participate more deeply in the eschatological. But before the council, because of secularism, we had forgotten about the eschatological. So what the council did is it reminded us of the eschatological, which means it didn't really talk about the little t stuff. And so it looked like the church was doing away with the little t stuff. And sometimes it did change little t stuff because we were focused on the little t stuff and not on the eschatological. It wanted to remind us. But when you say that to a secular world, when you say that to a church infected by secularism, they don't hear what you're actually saying, which is why you had the chaos after the council. And so I think the church is, like in shock, like, oh goodness, what happened? And so they're kind of frozen, I think. But eventually, I think what's going to happen is that it's going to have to um, pick the pieces back up. And so I think there's a both and here. I think because you do see this in the more traditionalist side of things, it's little t's and sometimes at the expense of the eschatological. Confession is like a car wash. It's not an encounter with a person. And so you have extremes here, but in the larger church, because it's true. People say that Catholic guilt and legalism. It's the Protestant critique, which is interesting because that's what people are saying about John. So again, Protestantism veers its head again. But so it's a both and. It's tricky. We have to trust the church and move forward. So it's not, maybe my answer isn't satisfying, but I do think, of course, mercy goes a long way. And especially because I've talked to non-Catholics, and it doesn't work if I say, you have to believe this, you're an idiot, or you're going to go to hell or something. No, it's like you show them that they're in hell and that they're not happy by being their friend, and kind of just, let them discover that. And then, this is the language of accompaniment. Oh, they're going to hate me for saying that. But there's truth to that. But then you also don't want to relativize the moral law. The church, as Bishop Barron said, right? The church has these extremely high expectations, but also this extremely profusive mercy, right? She will forgive anything, but she expects everything. So sorry if that doesn't help, Andrew, but or Andy. So we'll see. What else do we have? Sean, have you given any more thought to my question? Yes, I was actually thinking about you before I did this stream, Sean. I have given thought about. Let me finish your question here. I thought about my question regarding the Great Commission. Oh, okay, and how, if we participate in it, it relates to we, the laity. I was actually thinking about your question on sacramental intention. I do want to answer that question. I've been so busy, sorry, but I want to go back and find that episode by Dr. Lawrence Feingold. He does address that, so I'll do my best to get back to you. When it comes to the Great Commission, yeah, the Petrine structure of the church, right, is the officially commissioned structure of the church in a certain sense, and it guards the commission of the laity. So it's not competition, right, but it's participation. So, for example, there's a difference between the ministerial priesthood and the priesthood of the baptized, right? The ministerial priesthood, the sacrament confers a character on the soul of the recipient, and it is an official mission, you might say, that is ministerial. Now, in our baptism, we receive a character that includes a participation in the priesthood of Christ that has its own mission, but it's not of the same kind as the ministerial priesthood because of the structure of the church. And so there is participation, but so participation is very similar to analogical language that you see. St. Thomas expounds it the best. Analogical language basically says something about something that is both similar and different to something else. So our priesthood is similar to the priesthood of the ministerial priests, but it's also different. And so it's degrees of participation in the ultimate reality, the ultimate priest, who's Jesus Christ. So I wonder if that helps, Sean. So, okay, yeah, thanks for clarifying. Postmillennialism. My question on eschatology. Premillennialism is the typical American Protestant doomsday belief, rapture plus earthly millennialism. Sorry. Maybe explain to me, because I forgot. Someone mentioned this to me a few months ago. But is millennialism the idea that there's going to be 1,000-year reign of Christ? Is that what that means? Thanks, appreciate it. Okay. Oh, that's all the questions. 55 minutes. Dang, I actually covered everything. All right, let me just double check my notes here. I actually do have two more questions here. Two more comments. This comment here says, SSPX priests say that you sin gravely only when you know with certainty that the Novus Ordo is dangerous for your faith. This rite is deadly sick. I don't know why. There is something with its form and essence. Its essence is the same as that of the Latin Mass, but its form is different and points into the wrong direction. Yeah, again, this goes against the tradition of the church when it comes to the indefectibility of the church. And then finally, this comment says canonizations are criticized because the procedures were changed due to post-conciliar reforms, and that's very well within the prerogatives of the church. You know, she can do that. You know, so I'm not sure what the argument is there. Looks like that's everything, guys. So I really appreciate you guys tuning in, and I really appreciate the supporters. Make sure you like, subscribe, and share this video. If I do end up removing comments for my own sanity and just, because I don't want it to scandalize other people, but I'm not sure yet because of many details about getting the info out there and for it to reach people. But anyway, regardless, share our videos because that's how we can reach people with the truth, right? Evangelization. And but I really am thankful for your support. Like, subscribe, hit the notification bell, and we'll see you guys next time. If I can find the logo, there it is.